Kim, when we have camps or clinics here at the ITRC, sometimes we do some drills that a lot of players have never seen before, and it's kind of a little unorthodox.
Yeah, definitely. We have some creative ways to get players to feel some different things in their approach.
The whole point we're trying to do is just break down the mechanics a little bit so they feel a little bit more what their body's doing and pay attention to different alignments and such.
Yeah, so they're less mechanical and trying to make sure things are exactly where they need to be, and we kind of incorporate a little bit more athleticism into their game.
Trying to, definitely get more athleticism, taking the mechanical part out of the game so they can find their more natural timing. On this drill, you want the bowler to line up with their back facing the pins, and if they're right-handed, they would rotate the ball around to the right side and step with the right foot at the same time. What we're looking for is taking the mechanics out of the approach of the 1, 2, 3, 4 in timing and try to find their natural timing as they go through the approach. On this variation, some players have trouble with the rotation around, so this one here, we're trying to keep the arm staying straight, go back and then turn. Again, trying to post the shot.
So in this drill, what we want the player to do is simply pick up the ball, put it in their hand, and just keep walking to never set, and just throw the ball to help them find the natural timing and balance.
In this drill, we want to take the side away, so we want the bowler to line up, get up onto the approach, and then pull the blindfold down and visualize the shot. So you want to get lined up, visualize the ball path, then you pull the blindfold down over your eyes.
If you're not comfortable with the blindfold, you can just close your eyes. That's an easy modification of this drill.
One of the drills you can also do with the blindfold is with a teammate, to have the teammate help them line them up. This creates trust with the teammates, where they make their adjustments. The bowler is totally blindfolded right here. Wants to give him an alignment so he can feel where he needs to go. And the bowler is going to try to make the shot. One of the tools we have here at the ITRC when we're actually training teams and groups is the strobes.
Right, these glasses, they affect your vision, so it kind of inhibits how well you can see what's in front of you.
So it's kind of not as bad as the blindfold or the bandanas, because you can actually see some shots. It just takes the vision away a little bit.
Right, we have the ability to kind of quicken it, or to really have a long delay between being able to see what's in front of you.
So generally we start them out at level 1, which is it's on and off very, very quick. So you just have to pick up a few things going on in the lane, but your vision is not really impaired.
Right, and then we'll kind of gradually increase it from shot to shot.
And eventually we would like to get them all the way up to setting number 8, which really takes a lot of their eyesight away. So they might only get to see 2, maybe 3 frames when they make their whole approach.
I think the real value with these strobe glasses is that to really let the player, when they're working on something in their physical game, it really sort of narrows their focus to such a degree that they're able to really isolate that movement and feel what's happening.
Yeah, we have a lot of players, especially when they're working on push away or timing, really be much more aware of where the ball position is and what's going on. So this was just a few of the drills that we use with teams and individuals here at the ITRC to get them a different feel of the game.
Right, so they don't get so hung up in where I need to be on 1, 2, and 3, and really start to remember that you want to be athletic when you play this game.
And a lot of the drills are actually taking the vision out, because we're so dominant of our eyes, we need to be able to feel what we're doing. Troubleshooting the arm swing. when things go haywire during the approach or thing, a lot of times we can relate to the arm swing.
Right. If that arm swing isn't happening the same way every time, we start to see inconsistencies with your ability to control your break point, your consistency at the arrows, your release. All those things can become very inconsistent.
So their launch angle might be changed, trying to play to the same break point, so they're going to be sliding somewhere, and that's what we actually would relate to drift.
Right. So there's so many common sort of issues with the arm swing. Some of it may be what's happening with your hand at the end of the push as it comes by your swing, where you are at the top of the swing. Many different things can go wrong that will relate to inconsistencies there on the lane.
So to become a more versatile and consistent player, we want to get that arm swing tightened up. So let's take a look at some common arm swing issues and troubleshoot how we actually could correct them. To have consistency for our launch angles as we're playing the lanes, we want to really focus on the arm swing and the arm swing direction. And some of the common problems that we see with a lot of the students that come here at the ITRC is that they have the arm swing either trapped behind their back or outside their head at the top of the backswing. This causes the player to have to redirect the swing as they're coming down, and thus they're going to lose accuracy and consistency at the release and their launch angle. In our first example here, you can see that the player gets it outside his head for a right-handed bowler. If we look at the line between the ball and his head, it wants to go left at the top of the swing. As he drops it down into the swing, he's going to have to redirect it to get to his launch angle. He's going to have to get perfect with this, because if he misses just a little bit, he's going to end up sending the ball left. In our next example, you can see that the player here gets it behind his back at the top of the backswing, which almost is looking like it's going to the lane to the right of him. He is going to have to redirect the swing as it's coming down quite a bit, and ends up being quite a ways away from his ankle with this redirection. Again, it's going to be hard to repeat this. One of the problems that causes it to get behind your back is that if you look at this player, if you push it out to your right, generally it's going to go the same distance inside your head at the top of the backswing. And then, being trapped behind your body, you're going to have to redirect it as it comes down. Let's take a look at some higher level players and look at their ball position start. As you can see here, Missy, she used to have the ball quite a bit out to the right, and it looks like she's almost going to be pushing it right at us or to the right. Because of this, it ends up going inside their head at the top of the backswing as well. Very good player, and even though she's a very high-end player, this is something that she's working on to try to improve. You can have some success with some swing issues, but it just makes it harder for you to repeat. If you look at here at Shannon, who has her ball placement between her head and shoulder, it's much easier to have a consistent swing because now the ball is in line with the head right at the start. As we can see here with Kelly Kulik as well, she is pushing the ball out to the right, and it gets outside of her head at the top of the backswing. These girls have worked hard on their game to get their arm swings improved, and now are not doing this, and their games have improved. Let's take a look at Chris. And as you can see with Chris, top of the backswing with his head pretty well lined straight up to his release point. This, if he lets go of the ball early, or if he lets go of it late, the ball is still going on the same launch angle. This is what we're striving to get all our players so they can have the consistency of the release and the launch angle. Now that we looked at some arm swing issues and troubleshot cause and effect how we can actually probably make them a little bit better, what's the benefit to the bowler?
Well, the bowler's going to be just much more consistent. Their repeatability is going to go up no matter the lane conditions.
So it helps them better repeat on their launch angles, at the break point, the arrows, so they can actually adjust to the lanes transition instead of adjusting to them changing.
Coach, it's unbelievable how important posting that shot and having balance at your finish position is important to executing that shot.
Right. If we look at all the great players who've had successful careers, everybody posts their shot at the end.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the key factors is, you know, knowing yourself when you're not going to probably post that shot. I know for myself, you've helped me over the years. When I get a little late with that timing and my shoulders tend to follow, I already know I'm getting off balance. I'm going to be throwing it with my upper body, and it's just not going to be a good shot.
Right. It's typically a result of something that's gone wrong earlier in your approach. It's a timing issue, and that's just the end effect of something that's gone a little haywire. Almost always going to affect your repeatability and your consistency.
I know over the years on tour, Dr. Dean used to always say, you know what, be the bowler you want to be and make sure that you signature every shot that you throw, which is so important. And basically your signature is your finish position, and it is. Without that great finish position, you're not able to execute the shot.
Right, and so much of that has to do with kind of your intention at the beginning. I think for me, especially when I'm trying to, throw a shot with intention that I autograph, it's very important that in the beginning I am set and I'm steady and I know this is what I'm up to. And it makes it so much easier for me to commit to a solid, committed, posted finish.
We touched on something earlier too. If you are off balance at the end of your release, if you feel like it just wasn't the best shot, kind of step back and analyze what you just did. Like you said, it's something obviously in the beginning that happened, but just take a moment to step back, figure out where that spot was, and maybe correct it on your next shot, but with intention.
Right.
So make sure that you post every shot at the finish like you mean it, because you know what? It equals success. A lot of times, Kim, when you see people in competition and they need that shot, you see a lot of times they use more of their body than they should, and you see that foot, that plant foot, move a little bit at the foul line, and you know right off the bat that it just wasn't a posted shot.
Right, and typically that happens right at the front, right at between the first and second step. Did they get the ball into motion at the right way? They just sort of abandon their mechanics in an effort to strike, and things go wrong at the end.
So it's amazing. It really does come back to fundamentals, getting the ball started when it's supposed to be. Make sure you use your legs for leverage, and it's really important to almost go back to your basic fundamentals.
Right, trust everything that you've worked on up to this point and believe in it, and things can't go wrong at the end.
Another key factor could be your shoes. I mean, we do bowl on a lot of different approaches around the world, and making sure that your bowling shoes fit the approaches that you are on definitely help give you that solid slide foundation.
Right. Climate is such a factor in whether or not we're going to be able to post. Are they too sticky? Are they too slippery? And again, another pitfall where we start to abandon our mechanics is obviously it's more important in our mind to stay upright and not fall. So we're trying to take care and be careful, and it's difficult to post.
So once again, it's not always just the physical game. We have to take note of our environment to make sure we make the right choices.
As well as our mental game.
I'm here with USBC Gold Coach and Coaching Specialist Stephen Padilla, and we're going to talk about a very interesting subject, the Pro Shop. It's one of the most important aspects that can help a bowler with both their game mentally and physically, and there are a lot of things we really need to feel comfortable about when approaching the Pro Shop, correct?
Exactly. When you go into the bowling center, you're already there, you're comfortable. A lot of times you may not be comfortable going into the Pro Shop. The Pro Shop has a lot to offer. If you're new to the Pro Shop and haven't been in there very much, not only merchandise and equipment inside the facility, but also lessons can be available. There's plenty of opportunity for more than just going in and picking up something for your game, to learn a lot about the game and to take that to your practice sessions to make yourself better.
So one of the interesting things is we actually have somebody with a lot of knowledge that's already in the bowling center that we go to every day, or bowl league or tournaments at. What are some of the most important questions that we should ask them? Let's start with the equipment. What should we key in on when we walk into that Pro Shop?
That's great. When you go into the Pro Shop, there's going to be a lot of things that can overwhelm you, because there's bowling balls everywhere. There'll be some bowling shoes, obviously a lot of accessories and stuff. The biggest things you'll want to talk about when you first enter the Pro Shop, you want to introduce yourself, get comfortable with your Pro Shop operator, and just learn about what they have to offer. Bowling balls are going to be one of the primary things you want to talk about. There's a lot of opportunity, a lot of things that go into developing one just for your game. So you want to really start asking questions about what the right equipment is for you, what the right kind of fit is for your hand. You want to talk a lot about what your style and your game is. Maybe even have the Pro Shop operator see you bowl some in order to get that right fit for your bowling game.
That's key. I see that a lot. People walk in and they'll say, into our Pro Shops, and they'll go, "What bowl's good for my game?" And I'm like, "Well, I haven't seen you bowl, and I don't really know you very well. Don't know what your ball speed is. Don't know what your rev rate is." And the first thing we do is let's see you throw a few shots, and then find out where they actually bowl, because the bowling center that you bowl in makes a big difference on the equipment also.
That's right. If you're not in your own own pro shop that you go visit all the time, or in your own bowling center that you're in all the time, you definitely want to make sure that they're aware of, your pro shop operators are aware of where you're going to compete, where you're going to bowl, even in tournament situations. If you're going to go to a national event, or you're going to go someplace outside of even your local area, you want to pass that information along, because there may be a different setup you need to go compete in that environment.
Okay, the other question I get a lot too is bowling shoes. You know, hey, I only bowl once a week. I see these bowling shoes that have all these interchangeable soles and heels. Is this something I need? So what are some of the different shoes for different types of bowlers?
It depends on the skill level. Now, beginning bowlers, they rent the house shoes. That's okay to begin with. But for introductory level, there's an entry-level shoe that matches the hand that you're using. Right-handed has a slide shoe on the left. Left-handed bowlers have a slide shoe on their right sole. And when you get past the introductory level, the interchangeables or the high-performance shoes allow you to be able to go to multiple environments. Whether you're on wood approaches, synthetic approaches, in a bowling center you're not familiar with at all, maybe you're there for the first time and you're not comfortable with your footing, you need these tools in order to get comfortable and to have those adjustments so that when you go to compete, you're comfortable and you're safe inside that environment.
And one of the keys too is with those shoes, they give you extra soles and heels. Definitely take advantage of that. Use them when you're practicing, when you're on your own and you're practicing. Change up your soles and heels a little bit, because it really does open your eyes to what's available to put on those shoes for those different approaches that you may encounter.
Yeah, it's the first thing you should do when you get to any event, whether you're in a league, whether you're in a tournament. You're not sure what's happened before you're bowling your event, so you want to go out there ahead of time, get the right combination on those soles and heels, and make sure you're ready to go.
Okay, and then the final thing that I think is really important, and I think sometimes, especially when we're a little bit of a higher average bowler and tournament bowlers, we forget about, is checking your grip. Now, we get lucky, and if we had a great ball driller from the very beginning, knock on wood, like I did, we don't have very many problems with our hands, and I've never had an injury, thank God, knock on wood again. But we should check that grip, correct? No matter what skill level, maybe before the season, or if we start to feel some type of ailment?
Absolutely. This is the most important place to do so. Your pro shop operator, the one you're going to work with on a regular basis, needs to know what's happening with your grip and also how you change. As you continue to bowl, you're not going to be the same person every day. So modifying your fit or making sure it fits so that you can make adjustments as you change day in and day out is going to be vital when it comes to understanding not only what you can do, but what you need to do in the future, especially when you're going to have new pieces of equipment drilled. You need to keep that plan together between you and your pro shop operator, and that fit is really one of the biggest keys you can get when you communicate back and forth.
Okay, some great advice, but one of the biggest things to always remember, it's communication. It's communication between the bowler and the pro shop and your coach. If you're not comfortable with going into the pro shop and asking some of these questions, ask someone who is comfortable with the pro shop environment. Have them go into the pro shop with you so that you become more comfortable.
Bowling ball matrix. Bowlers will come into the pro shops or players and trying to find that perfect 6-ball arsenal, and they're trying to find a very simple system where they can get ball 1, ball 2, etc. for their game. Does that actually really exist?
Yeah, I think the key word in that statement is simple, and that nothing is simple anymore. Bowling ball dynamics have gotten so complicated. The different type of lane surfaces you see out in the field, whether it be wood lanes with guardian overlays or whether you have different type of synthetics, Brunswick, AMF. So there's so many different variables that really determine what a ball does when it rolls down the lane, that making a true bowling ball matrix nowadays is almost an impossible feat, so to speak.
Because it's doing it, they're looking at it very two-dimensionally, and it's become such a three-dimensional game that there's so many aspects that one affects another. Now, when I was first getting in the pro shop business, I had a very simple wall, maybe had 30, 40 bowling balls on the rack, but I had an oil section, a medium section, and a dry section, and it was very easy. A bowler come in and I needed a ball for oily lanes, and it would work for him. But nowadays that's not true.
Yeah, exactly. It seemed like the strongest bowling ball in the market back in the late 80s, early 90s was truly the strongest ball regardless of what pattern you bowled on. But now with the complications of just the crazy sort of cores and cover combinations that they can put on bowling balls, sometimes your strongest ball will actually go straighter than your weakest ball in your bag. So it makes it very, very hard just to say, well, this is the ball that you should use all the time for this type of pattern, and vice versa, so on down the line.
So some of the parameters they're going to be looking at is the bowler speed, how fast they throw it, And bowlers used to keep a pretty constant speed, but now bowlers have become very versatile as well. So they're changing their ball speeds, they're changing their hand rotation, they're changing their RPM. So the bowlers are changing more variables nowadays than they used to in the past as well.
Yeah, I think how we look at it here in the ITRC is that, you know, the most important aspect of it is what we call your release ratio, which is really how fast the ball is traveling down the lane versus how fast it is spinning off of your hand.
What's the difference between how fast it's spinning off your hand as opposed to RPMs?
Well, if you actually convert RPMs over to miles per hour, you can see that, for example, if somebody throws the ball at 21 miles per hour, and through the conversion rate of converting RPMs from, let's say, 350, we can convert that to basically, let's say, 7 miles per hour. So we have the ball going down the lane at 21 miles per hour and the ball spinning at 7 miles per hour. That ratio being 3 to 1. The ball is traveling down the lane 3 times faster than it is actually spinning off the bowler's hand.
So it's actually the part of the ball that's touching the lane that we're measuring, so it's actually surface speed of that bowling ball. So that gets in part of the formula to try to match up. Now you have volume of oil out there, so we have short patterns could have a lot of oil, and we could have long patterns that don't. So it's not just oily or dry lanes as well.
Yeah, exactly. The distance that the ball is going down, you know, the distance that the oil is applied. You know, if we're only talking about 35 feet, most of the public thinks, well, that means I need a weak ball. Well, lots of times it means you need a strong ball because within that 35 feet, we have a lot of volume on the lane.
So bowlers just thinking oily or dry, they're not looking at the full picture. You got to look at the distance and the volume. Now, one of the aspects that bowling balls have is called RG. Now, how does that relate to a bowler, and what should they be concerned about RG?
Yeah, how RG basically relates to bowlers and the bowling balls is that the lower the RG number, the easier it is for that ball to get into a roll, so to speak. The easier it is for that core to start tumbling. The higher the RG, more of it's going to be more of a loping type action as it's rolling down the lane.
So some numbers that you'll see out there, like we would say a low RG is like a 2.48, and what that means, it takes less friction to not taking the surface, it's just the ball dynamics, that less friction to start trying to spin a little bit faster. So someone who had a release ratio that was closer and they're throwing the ball very fast would probably want more of a low RG type of ball.
Yeah, so that the ball's going to naturally want to get started a little bit sooner so that they're not going to have to manipulate their ball speed and different things to try and match up.
And a bowler who has a wider ratio and threw the ball a little bit slower might want to look at a high RG ball, somewhere around 255 is somewhere of the numbers approximately, because they don't want it to do it so soon. They can't have it happen too early.
Yeah, because once again, the bowling lane is never going to change in terms of the distance. It's always going to be 60 feet from the foul line to the head pin, regardless of where you go. Now, all the different parameters may change within that, meaning the volume of oil, the type of lane surface. There's tons of things that are going to change, but that distance is always going to stay the same. So if the initial ball speed is slower, it's going to obviously take that bowling ball a longer amount of time to get down the lane. So we don't want things starting up very soon and very early.
So how important do you think bowlers should be paying to like the 2.48, 2.49, 2.5? What is it really that critical, or is there a lot of difference between 2.48 and 2.5?
Yeah, I think it depends really on the skill level. The more advanced the skill level, that player can see those small little differences between a ball that has a 2.48 RG versus a ball that has a 2.51, and keeping everything else the same. So once we start getting down a little bit lower, you're basically just looking for generalities, I think you could say. Find a ball that you really like, a ball in the past, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, that you really enjoyed the way it rolled and it seemed to be pretty versatile on a majority of conditions. And then go research what those numbers were, what that RG number was, what the differential number was, and just then maybe on your next purchase, go try and purchase a ball with those same type of numbers.
Just with a new updated cover stock or something, because the cover stock has overrides anything that's actually really inside the ball.
Exactly, the surface of the bowling ball and the cover stock, what it's actually made out of, are going to be roughly 2/3 of overall ball motion anyway, so that's going to be the most important aspect.
So you mentioned a ball that we liked in the past. So if I'm just bowling a couple of leagues and a couple of bowling centers and bowling 3 or 4 tournaments a year, I probably want to keep in the same RG range for my bowling style. So I'm going to find something that I liked in the past and probably look at something more. So I don't necessarily need, if I liked it in a low RG, I'm not probably going to have a high RG ball in my arsenal.
Yeah, not unless you're really trying to diversify your arsenal and have really wide ranges on either side.
But how many balls do you think would be in an arsenal? Would that be a 6-ball arsenal, 8-ball arsenal? How big an arsenal if you want to get that diversified to your arsenal?
Yeah, I think it all depends on how much play you do outside of your normal center and how much traveling you do. You know, people that have to travel overseas or people that travel around the country bowling different tournaments, obviously their arsenal needs to be a little bit bigger than if you're just sticking to 1 or 2 centers where you basically know what's going to work best for you.
But you mentioned even the guys that are traveling and ladies that are traveling overseas with the airline restrictions, they're only taking 4 or 6 balls, so they really need to know what their arsenal is.
Sure, sure.
Now, differential, you mentioned differential. That's another aspect that when you're purchasing bowling ball you want to look at, and I think the maximum is a 0.6.
Yep.
So what does differential have to do with ball motion and for your arsenal?
Well, differential is basically going to tell you the hook potential of a bowling ball. Now, once again, that's not talking about the variables that you impart to a bowling ball, because rotation obviously has to do something with that. If you release the ball rolling dead end over end, the ball could have the most differential in the world and still go straight. So with differential and rotation being considered equal, we're going to talk about the differential being the difference between the high RG and the low RG of the bowling ball. Subtract those two, and what the difference is tells you how much imbalance there is within the core, and the ball's going to obviously try and stabilize itself as it's rolling down the lane.
So a low differential ball would have the core inside the ball pretty much the shape of a bowling ball, just kind of round and very little difference between the different sides. But if the inside of the bowling ball was similar shaped to like a bowling pin, standing at an end, there's going to be a lot of resistance, but if you do it sideways like a spiral in a football, it's going to be less. So that would be a high differential ball.
Yep.
Now, where would I want to use differential? Do I want to use it on high volume or low volume?
I'll generally want to use it on higher volume type patterns. You know, patterns where you want to get the ball started soon so it reads that break point and it reads the end of the pattern nice and smoothly. So we don't want to necessarily have the ball retaining all of its energy to the back end of the pattern. We want it to be starting up relatively quick so that we can get a smooth, predictable type shape off the back of the pattern.
Now, on long patterns or short patterns, would it make a difference, or is volume going to be the overriding key?
Yeah, that's where I think the majority of the public gets things confused, is that they always dictate what type of ball I need to use based off the distance and not the volume, when it's exactly the opposite. The distance is going to tell you roughly where you want to be with your feet and with your break point, maybe what ball speed and hand action you're using, but not the type of bowling ball. That's going to be determined based off of the volume of the lane and the type of surface that you're on.
So I'm starting to build my arsenal, and we always hear this term, your benchmark ball. What should your benchmark ball be?
Yeah, I think your benchmark ball should be really something that you've had success with in the past. Research what those numbers are, and not take a super high-powered aggressive bowling ball and then not a really low, sort of weaker type cover stock, something in the middle. But then it also has to be based on your own style as well. You know, if you tend to be someone that is more of a speed dominant type player or has a higher ratio per se, meaning your ball speed is traveling much faster than it is actually spinning off of your hand, then obviously your benchmark ball is going to be a little bit more on the aggressive side than somebody who generally has a lower ball speed.
But we still want a benchmark doesn't have to be exactly in the middle, but somewhere in the middle,
yeah.
So that you can go to something that's going to be a little earlier or something that's a little bit later, so you have some versatility with your arsenal.
Yeah, if your benchmark ball tends to be, let's say, the 3rd or 4th strongest ball on the market today, well, you don't have much to go above that. So really all of your moves are going to have to be the other way in terms of bowling ball dynamics and bowling ball strength-wise. So really trying to find a middle ground. And, you know, I think the best way to do it anymore is really go look in your bag and see what ball works well or has worked well in the past, research those numbers, see what those numbers are, and then base everything based off those numbers, but then maybe change the cover stock and stuff like that a little bit.
But again, overriding thing is going to be surface. The
Yep.
surface you put on the bowling ball, and bowlers don't adjust that enough.
No, for sure, yeah. Just because it comes on the shelf at a certain type of surface, whether it be 4000 with polish over the top of it, doesn't mean it has to stay that way. If you throw that ball and it just looks like it's going a little bit too long, you know, don't be afraid to cut that surface down. I would say the majority of the higher end bowlers very rarely throw a ball with the same surface that it came out of the box. They may try it like that, but most times they end up having to tweak it just ever so slightly for whatever their style is.
So that's why a matrix apparently is so hard to build, because there's
Exactly.
so many variables involved in what you're competing on.
Yeah, it's changing so much, and you know, not only that, but every single shot you throw on the lane is changing. So there's so many variables that it really makes it hard to make a true matrix that says, this is how I bowl, and this is the ball for me. It's almost something that is becoming more obsolete, and it's really hard to find.
So in essence, we want to find a benchmark, something that has kind of RG, that's kind of the balance for our game, and then get something that gives us a little bit of different shapes going down the lane, mainly with surface. So once we find that RG range that we kind of like and everything, we might want to keep that the insides similar and just change those covers.
Yep, so that way you're getting a little bit more on the hooking end side of your benchmark ball, and then another ball that's on a little bit weaker side or a little bit less hooking for a lower volume of oil.
But bowlers need to be realistic about what their game is, their speed, how they throw the ball, and where they're competing.
Yeah, and I think with those things, you can at least get a good starting point for what balls will work best for you.
Okay, so what we have here is we have a thumb sleeve or a thumb slug that we should actually put into a bowling ball, and we have a finger insert. And we'll kind of give you a demonstration of how little you change angles and it sounds like a bigger number.
Yeah, so because of the fact that the pitches are actually measured off the geometric center of the bowling ball, what we've done here is we just put a little dot that signifies the center of the bowling ball. So if we imagine that our fingers are going to be up like so in this part of the bowling ball, 0 degrees of pitch would have that pencil pointed directly at the geometric center of the ball. In order to move it 1/4 of an inch reverse, let's say, all we're going to do is change that to where that tip of the pencil now comes down 1/4 of an inch to that side of the geometric center. So if we look at the top of the grip, by moving that, we're not really changing that drastic amount. So lots of times when people get worried about my finger pitches, I'm changing finger pitches, there's not that big of a change to go from 0 to a half, but yet those numbers sound pretty
Half
big
sounds
and
like a
drastic.
lot,
Yeah.
but really if we go up here and the finger is actually only into the ball, a little part, and we're just doing this to try to get better pressure on the pad so they actually get a better feel and it just is grip pressure. So sometimes people always felt like you put more forward will give you more lift, and that's just not what we want to be using nowadays.
Yeah, if anything, it goes against what we want to have happen. We want, like you said, we want to feel the bowling ball on the pads of our fingers, or if I'll use this pencil as a reference, we want to feel the pad of our finger on the leading edge of the grip. What happens when we start to pitch that finger forward is that we lose that contact point, and all that happens when our fingers come out of the ball is that we barely catch it off the tip of our fingers. And what it used to make us do is sort of hit up on the ball, which is what we wanted to do in urethane days. But with today's bowling balls, we want it to kind of roll off our fingers.
So they would actually have burns on the tips of the fingers and think they're getting a lot on the bowling ball, but actually they're getting very, very little. But your finger is going to be tingling because you're just catching that lip coming out. So they'd be better off going the other way with the pitch angle.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll get into that a little bit later as to, to show different flexibilities of fingers and how finger pitches are just a number. We just want to make sure they match the relationship of the angle to the pad of our finger.
And then if we take a thumb's going to be a little bit deeper. So you will feel a little bit more of your pitch changes with the thumb moving back and forth. But again, going 1/4 or a 1/2 inch, it sounds like a lot, but it's actually very little in the scheme of things.
Yeah, they're really just numbers when it all comes down to it. And that all we have to do is match the flexibility of the player's hand to the pitch that's inside the hole.
So if I go behind the geometric center of the bowling ball, we call that reverse.
pitch.
And if we go in front of it, we call that forward, whether it's the fingers or the thumb, correct?
Exactly, same thing. So if you want to put that thumb right down there, Rod, and if we both go to the behind that number, that is both going to be, if they don't intersect until after the geometric center of the ball, then that would both be considered reverse pitch in both directions.
And if we come
If
the other way,
and they intersect in front of the geometric center of the ball, that's forward pitch.
it's going to be forward. And again, we also have left and right lateral, and it's just going to be the same thing, whether it goes left or right of the center. So those are going to be the two dimensions, so we can match a finger pitch or angle in a bowling ball with any drill press.
Correct.
The tools that we use in the pro shop are actually what we call pitch gauges. So actually I'll measure the angle of going back and forth so we can measure it into a bowling ball and see the angle that that hole is drilled in the ball.
Yeah, so for example here, in one of my bowling balls I have 0 pitch laterally, so side to side, and 0 pitch front to back. So if we put the pitch gauge into that weight hole, you can see that it lines up directly with 0 in that direction. If I spin it like so and go the opposite direction, it's 0 again. So the weight hole, there's no pitch. We're not putting our actual digits in there, so we don't necessarily need to worry about the direction that it's drilled into the bowling ball. But then we get into the different parts. Let's say my thumb. Now my flexibility rod is on the little bit of the weaker side of, not super duper flexible, not the worst flexibility, but not really flexible. So when we consider my pitches, we have to make accommodations, and it's not something that I've done like not my first try did I really get it. It's something that it took me years and years of really
Bowlers
trying.
are always changing or trying to fine tune their pitches a little bit because their swing pressure is going to drop down, grip pressure is going to drop down. So, you know, the pitches you might have had a year ago, 2 years, 3 years ago might not be the right pitches for you now.
Yeah, exactly. So some fine tuning on my part and our part, I guess, here in the training center is that we came up with around 3/16 to the left is what worked best for me.
So even though this shows up here on the scale, on one side we're looking at the angle that the hole is going into the ball. And we want to go across 90 degrees to the grip center. That's going to be our lateral left to right.
Yeah, so that's basically some thumb pitches. Rod, if you want to grab me the other one here. Now we talked about finger pitches, and what we want to have happen is get the pad of our finger resting on that leading edge. Well, if we look at my flexibility of this finger, it hardly bends at all.
And we're looking at this joint right here.
Exactly, that first leading joint, the first joint down from our nail. So if I'm trying to make that finger bend, but yet I want to have the leading edge of that grip resting there, if I were to use zero pitch or go straight down to the geometric center of the ball, I can't get to that at all.
So you really have to shorten the distance to be able to do it. Now we're defeating the whole fit.
Exactly. So for me, you know, once again, it's just a number. But what I actually have to use in my finger pitches here is I have to use 1 inch reverse in that finger in order to get that leading edge resting on the pad of my finger.
1 inch sounds like a lot.
It does sound like a lot, and trust me, I was scared at first. I mean, I would go with 3/8, I went with a half, and then you start to get to those big numbers, and you know, it's just a number that people think, well, gosh, now I'm never going to really be able to hit the bowling ball or really lift the bowling ball off of my hand. But if anything, the other way was causing more pain and, you know, less sort of rolling down off the fingers.
So it actually matched up to your hand better to let you get your grip pressure down and actually to have a more consistent release.
Yeah. Yeah, so then we take my other finger, which is a lot more flexible, but still not super flexible comparatively to some people that we can see. And that other finger for me is measured at 5/8 of an inch. So once again, still a pretty big number. What a lot of pro shops tend to do is, I think they don't put a lot of stock in the finger pitches. They just kind of like, well, they don't mean much because they're not going down into the hole very far, so it's not that big of a deal if we don't necessarily make sure it matches the hand. But just like every other part of the fit, whether we're considering the thumb or the span, we have to make sure that, you know, those are matching the flexibility of our hand.
Now, we see it here in the training center quite often. Players will come in here and they have forward in the fingers. How often are we really recommending forward in the fingers nowadays?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, because really, in order to properly have forward pitch in the fingers, we're going to have more than 90 degrees of flexibility with that finger joint, with keeping the second joint, this bigger knuckle down here, keeping it straight.
Yes.
So I haven't seen too many people that can bend that finger more than 90 degrees with keeping this finger joint straight. So I would almost say never do we suggest forward pitch. Now, younger players or you know, females tend to have better flexibility. So maybe, you know, teenage females can have enough flexibility where zero could be worthwhile,
right,
and can still get that pad of that finger with zero pitch. But in the grand scheme of things, to go forward or underneath in those fingers, that's really something that I think went away with the 90s.
Yeah, there was a trend to think that you could get more on the bowling ball by going into the forward, and we found it just the opposite. Also, we see a lot of times too, and you demonstrated it very well, both fingers should not be the same pitch because they're not going to have the same flexibility. And we see a lot of times they try to get more on the ring finger because it's a little weaker finger. So they try to go more forward or not as much reverse on the ring as they do in the middle, and you should go the other way.
Yeah, it's generally the opposite. Like you said, we generally see that the ring finger tends to be a little less flexible than the middle finger for whatever reason. You say it's a weaker finger. I don't know if we use it differently in our day-to-day lives or we put more stress on the joints, but for whatever reason, the ring finger tends to be a little less flexible. So like you said, we generally want to go the other way, and we want to have more reverse in that finger so that we can get that pad of our finger resting on that leading edge of the grip.
Now, if you're having inserts in there, do there need to be any adjustments made because of type of insert with the pitches you're drilling the ball?
Yeah, depending. The oval inserts don't have any pitch already inserted into the grip itself. But when you consider lift grips, you know, the oval with the little nub in the front or the lift grips, that side of the grip generally does have a little bit of pitch, whether it be an eighth or a quarter. So if that side of the grip feels more comfortable to you, then you have to make pitch accommodations to take that pitch of the grip itself, the already natural pitch that's inside of the grip, to take that into account.
So the key is you visit your pro shop and you want to work with your pro shop and your coach to try to get the pitches that match up to your hand to help reduce your grip pressure, to have a better or looser arm swing, and have it checked every about 6 months to a year, because as your game advances, your grip pressure hopefully is going down and you're going to need some pitch adjustments.
Coach, tournaments are a really big deal, whether it be your city tournament, state tournament, a national event, and being prepared is so key to performance.
Yeah, if you want to perform well in any event, you got to take the preparation time ahead of time to make sure you're ready, whether it's knowing the format of the event, knowing the venue, and knowing a little bit about the environment, also knowing what your tools need to be sharp in order to go to that event. All of it's important when it comes to tournament time.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the factors. Let's start right off the bat with our lane surface and the pattern that I'm bowling on. What should I know about that?
Well, the important thing, the first thing you need to know is it's going to be different every time you go somewhere. So you're never going to run into exactly the same thing. It's always going to be different. For the lanes, you kind of want to know what the surface is. Is it a surface that tends to be slicker or smoother, or is it one that has more texture that may have a little bit more of a ball reaction to it? So the biggest difference in surface is going to be big. You mentioned pattern and format. Knowing the difference in what kind of pattern and what kind of lane conditioner they're using will make a difference in what you do for your practice sessions or how you get ready for the event. If you're at an event and you know that the practice set or that the event has a short oil distance pattern or a long oil distance pattern, will make a difference in how you need to practice.
Well, that also leads us to when we find out if the pattern is going to be a little bit longer, we know we're going to play a little bit further in. And also the volume of oil is going to make a difference on what bowling balls I choose and the surface that I put on them.
Yeah, exactly. The amount of oil on the lane will make a difference in what your ball selection should be. Also, like you mentioned, the distance of the pattern will dictate where you start to move your feet, where the bowling ball should be as it comes out off the end of the oil pattern. There's a lot of functions and features of the actual lane surface and lane pattern that are going to dictate what you should do in preparation.
Now, if there's nothing there available for you to change your ball surfaces, one of the things you can do is make sure you're prepared in bringing Abralon pads and not forget about those different soles and heels, because we don't know what we're going to have out there.
Yeah, tournament prep is not just going out there and throwing shots. Tournament prep is also having the right kind of tools with you. And the Abralon pads for changing surfaces, the right kind of soles and heels like you mentioned, all these need to be tested ahead of time. Don't go into an event expecting just to have those tools and know immediately how to use them. You got to practice with those too, just like you would your game. So get comfortable and get used to the tools that aren't just throwing the ball, that help make your game better at the time.
Okay, so we've talked about our playing surface and we've talked about what we're actually going to throw down the lane, which is our bowling balls and our shoes. But one of the things we need to do is mentally prepare. And you keyed on a really big factor, the format. So my mentality when I show up for 3 games, it's like I've got to get lined up, I have to attack really early because I only have 3 games. What happens when you have 8 games?
Yeah, there are sprints that are really short, but on that 8-game format, that really long marathon, number one, know how many bowlers are going to be on the pair so you know the pace of play. The pace of play is going to be huge, especially when you practice. A lot of us go practice and we just keep throwing ball after ball. When you get out to the event and there's an 8-game format, it's longer, maybe you have more time between each shot, you need to practice that pace as well, because it becomes important to know what your body's going to do and how you're going to react to the different paces of play. So an 8-game format to me, a longer format, you may need to take food with you. You may need something to actually keep your energy level up for that longer format, because it's not going to be a sprint, it's going to be a marathon.
One of the key factors too, I believe, is in the 8-gamer, don't get down so quick. You know, I see a lot of bowlers where the first game or the second game they're not bowling so well. There's 6 more games. I mean, that's a lot of games to be able to, you know, get to where you want to be. So I pace myself mentally a little bit different when I'm bowling the 3 games as compared to the 8 games.
Yeah, sometimes it's challenging. Knowing there's a longer format coming, and then knowing that you have some time where if I do have a slip, a bad game, a couple of bad frames, it's a lot easier to make those up in that 8-game format than it would be in that sprint or that 3-game format. So make sure you're mentally prepared and know that you don't have to beat yourself up after 1 shot in a 3-game format when you get into that longer 8-game format.
Okay, and then you did key on the practicing. Don't be afraid to ask your bowling centers to put down a competition pattern for you, so A, you could practice, but asking people to practice with you to get that tournament breakdown so that you can actually see the way the lanes may, transition, and you can try your equipment and some of those tools as we talk about getting up the back of the ball, getting on the side of the ball, really could help before you get to that event.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. Not only knowing the format and knowing how it's going to play out, but also getting as much preparation. And kind of what you're talking about is building the environment as close as you can to the actual environment of the event. And having somebody practice with you, having the bowling center put out those lane patterns, all of those things are going to make you more comfortable when you get to that event so that you can perform at your best when you're there. And that's going to be real important. And it's really going to be something that you're going to take a lot of information out of when you actually get to the event, because you're going to learn what worked and what didn't work. You're going to be able to know what to take to my next practice session, or when the event comes around, whether it's annually, whether it's every month, you can start practicing appropriately and hopefully increase your scores.
And don't forget, if you've bowled the event before, which for many years I bowled both the Open and the women's tournaments, I have a recollection of what bowling centers, how they played and what equipment I used. So it's really great to reflect on a couple years back when you've bowled at those places so that you can prepare for that current year.
Yeah, I know several players that I've had a chance to work with coaching-wise, but that I also compete with, that they have specific equipment they'll take to a certain venue. They'll go back to the same event every so often, and they'll know that these types of equipment worked in this environment. Or they'll drill their new stuff to accommodate what they used in the past they had success with. So they know there's going to be changes. There's always going to be a change when you go to any kind of venue. But having that experience and just knowing what to expect, or having an idea of what to expect, can really help set you up for the event.
So being prepared for a tournament, it goes back to planning. Have a game plan, whether you're reflecting on information that you had from years ago that you're going to update for the current tournament. It's all about the plan. So being prepared, don't forget, ask your friends, ask your coaches, and try to practice ahead of time to be prepared for what you're trying to do.
As coaches for Team USA, we get to travel the world and get to see a lot of different or unique styles that exist around the world.
Yeah, and not only different styles, but also the evolution of styles.
Let's take a look at some of these styles.
Okay, one of the unique styles that we see in our international travels is going to be the helicopter or the spinner that we'll see, and it was pretty dominant in Asia about 10 years ago, but there's still quite a few competing internationally.
Right, that are successful, winning medals in world championships. Definitely on the women's side, we've seen them just in recent times, in singles and trios, just dominating.
And it's quite amazing to think about them bowling the scores that they can, especially when you consider what weight ball they're throwing.
It's 11.5, generally it's less than 12 pounds. What is different?
Well, like we talk about all the time, we always want to try and make sure our ball gets into the roll phase as it's entering the pins for all traditional players. But with the spinners, it's the opposite. They don't want their ball rolling at all. They want their ball hitting the head pin and then deflecting off to the right, basically taking the whole row of pins, going right down the sequence. And whether they're hitting the head pin and the 2-pin or the head pin and the 3-pin, there really is no pocket for them. It's either side of the head pin.
Okay, first time when we really came across the two-handed style, we were at the World Youth in 2002, and there was a couple of young players there. One of them was from Australia, and the other one was Finland, and they were just throwing the ball phenomenally with two hands, and it was kind of a style that hadn't been really introduced in the U.S. at the time. And there was kind of controversy at the time whether it was a legal release, of whether it should be you can use it in competition, and it was really misunderstood because they literally thought that they threw it with two hands.
Right. And so many people were just up in arms about it, and even nowadays still it's a bit of a struggle when you have young players that are kind of growing up doing it, and parents are like, well, should I keep them two-handed? Should I go with the more traditional way of playing the game? And gosh, there's definitely plenty of success and with the two-handers around the world, and
But it's really just a two-handed swing. I mean, if you get down to it, it's not a two-handed release. It's actually a two-handed swing. They're swinging the ball back. It's still just one hand releasing the bowling ball.
Yeah, we have lots of video, and as we'll see here, when they're actually releasing the ball, their opposite hand, or the hand that is actually supporting the ball throughout the swing, is well off the ball before they actually release it. So, it's they're not breaking any rules. It is just a one-handed release, but it's really just a two-handed approach that's sort of helping guide the ball throughout the swing so that they can get their body moving at that incredible rate of speed to generate that much speed and power in order to throw it as fast as they do down the lane.
And there's two styles. We'll see some put their thumb in the ball, some styles don't put their thumb in the ball. Is there any advantage or disadvantage to that?
Yeah, well, I've talked to a lot of them that don't put it in the ball, and they're all, they all believe that not in the ball is definitely the way to go, just because of different tricks you can use.
And now we've seen the evolution actually go a little bit farther. Now we've seen some people throwing it, they used to use their backup ball or a reverse hook, but now they're doing it with two-handed and versatility and having some success.
Yeah, lots of times when you used to see the backup ball player, it actually a little bit more pressure on their wrist, but because we're able to do it with the two-handed style, now you're just increasing a lot more power, and their ability to be able to hook the ball a little bit more tends to be, seems like it's a little bit easier to do.